On this week's show, we're talking about one of Bangkok's hippest neighborhoods, the shiny, bright Thong Lor.
So if you're a fan of fine food, good drinks, and mostly friendly hipsters, you will dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome on down to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who is looking longingly at Canada's air quality readings, despite it being minus 18 degrees Celsius in my hometown as we record this.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 17 years ago, fell in love with particulate matter smaller than 2.5 microns, and never left.
You're in the right place.
That's right. Anyway, before we start, a huge thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. For more info on how you can become a patron, just head to the support page on BangkokPodcast.com. You can learn more about becoming a patron on our website, and of course, one of the cool things our patrons get is an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we talk about all kinds of stuff. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the smog once again, as well as the new plan to spray sugar water and or molasses into the air to cut it down. That's actually a true story, believe it or not. As well as the new requirement for retirees to keep 800,000 baht in their account for 3 months after they get their visa extension. So become a patron and check out the bonus show.
Yeah, totally. All right, well, before we jump into it, we want to mention what our top 10 most downloaded shows were in 2018. Now, generally speaking, a single episode's download totals are measured over the 30 days since it first drops. So if an episode is released on January 1st, we'd measure until January 30th, and the total number of downloads in that time would be our number. So there were a few surprises here, actually. A couple of shows that I thought wouldn't be that well received appeared in our top 10. So our number one downloaded show last year was the show Season 3, Episode 20, and that was Thai Work Permits, What Just Changed, where we discussed recent changes to the Thai work permit laws, and I can imagine that would have been of particular interest to a lot of people living in Thailand.
For sure.
Number 2 was Expat Insights, Owning a Restaurant in Bangkok, where we interviewed your buddy Matthew about what it's like opening and running a couple of kind of successful but small restaurants, which was really interesting. Number 3 was Permanent Residency in Thailand. Is it worth it? That was episode 25. And you talked a lot on that one because you have PR and you gave us some insights into what goes on with that. That was really cool too.
Clearly that's why it was so popular.
People were like, more Ed the truth. And our number four show was Insight into Bangkok's Mobile Street Vendors, which was surprising. I thought that one was a good episode, but I thought it was fairly niche.
Right.
Where we talked about the sort of communities of street vendors that wander around the city selling brooms and vegetables and stuff like that. But apparently it resonated with a lot of people because that was our fourth most downloaded show. Number 5 was episode 29, Thai Ghost Stories, Myth and Terror, which I thought was really fun. I had a lot of fun researching that one and recording it too.
Yeah, I think we should do another ghost episode. I think it's just a cool topic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And number 6 was Bangkok History Highlight, Plek Pibun Song Kram. That was episode 27. That was a really cool one too. That was a really interesting insight into a really interesting person back in Thailand's middle of the 20th century. And number 7 was episode 12, Talking Over Tourism with Stuart McDonald, with from travelfish.org. And it's always great to have Stu on the show. He's got a lot of valuable insights, and he has a huge social media following too, so I'm sure we benefited from his retweets. Thank you, Stu.
Yep.
Number 8 was Neighborhood Focus Victory Monument, where we talked about what it's like to live in that neighborhood. And number 9 was Gay Rights in Thailand, where we talked to one of your old students, right, who is a gay rights activist.
That's right.
Yeah, that was really interesting.
Excellent.
That was number 28. And our 10th most downloaded episode of the year was actually the last episode of the year, which was episode 40, Make COO Drew Kamtong Talks Tech, Design, and Management in Bangkok, which is all about what it's like running a medium-sized technology company in Bangkok. And I think that resonated with a lot of people too, because we often get emails from people asking advice about where can I get a job? I'm a computer programmer. Where can I get a job doing this and that? And I think Bangkok is starting to become known as kind of a tech hub. So that was our top 10 shows downloaded last year.
Great. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. Again, thanks to everyone who downloaded and listened, and everyone who's continuing to download and listen. All right. Well, on this episode, we want to jump back into our neighborhood focus series with one of my favorite areas of Bangkok, the poster child of gentrification, the shiny, expensive, constantly evolving Sukhumvit Soi 55, also known as Thong Lor, or Thong Lor, as Ed says.
Yeah. So, Greg, why don't you start it off? Because you have a history on Thong Lor, don't you?
Yeah, most definitely. Well, for our purposes tonight, first of all, we define Thong Lor as measures all the way down Sukhumvit 55 between Sukhumvit and Petbury Road. And then it kind of goes to the east, it kind of goes halfway between Thong Lor and Ekamai. And then to the west, it kind of goes a bit further, sort of into the back sois towards Sukhumvit 39, which is where Samitiwet Hospital is. And the area that sort of is defined as Thong Lor kind of gets a bit fuzzy towards the northwest quadrant of this division. But that's basically how we define Thong Lor. You can see it on the episode artwork. But when I first moved to Bangkok in 2001, my first job was at a language agency teaching English on Thong Lor Soi 13. And the woman called me and she's like, yeah, come for an interview down on Thong Lor. And I was like, Thong Lor? Where the hell is Thong Lor? You know, and back then, Thong Lor was kind of like what On Nut is now. You know, like it's kind of far out there. You don't really go out there unless you like have a reason to go out there, but it's kind of an up and coming area. That was Thong Lor back then. And of course now it's just 180 degrees different.
Yeah, that's true.
I lived on Thong Lor for 4 years, and I really liked it then, but I gotta say, it's probably one of my favorite areas of Bangkok today.
Yeah, you know, it is a place that has changed an incredible amount. I do remember back in the day when I also had to go to Thong Lor, and I was like, wow, that's really way far out there, which is just kind of silly thinking today.
Yeah.
But Greg and I were lucky because even though Greg lived there a while back, he and I have a mutual friend, our friend Paul, who grew up on Thong Lor and was there, I think he said in the 80s.
Right.
He told us some crazy stories that back in the day where his family lived, you know, there was essentially, it was a lot of open fields in the 80s, and he said there were actually even cows roaming around on Thong Lor.
It's hard to imagine now, eh?
Yeah. So it really has developed quickly. It's not some old Bangkok street that's been around forever. That's not it at all. It's like a brand new last 20, 30 years, you know.
And in the course of researching this episode, actually, I came across some information, and apparently Thong Lor actually means gold cast, as in a mold, like you cast gold into a shape.
Wait, hold on a second. So Thong is gold. I thought law was handsome, so it does not mean handsome gold?
No, same sound, different word. Law is like a mold you make. You pour molten metal into to make a shape.
Ah, interesting. Okay, I did not know that.
Yeah, and it was named after Thonglor Khamhiran, who was a member of the Kanaratsadon, or People's Party, which was a group of officers that overthrew the monarchy in the coup of 1932, bringing in constitutional monarchy to Thailand. So he was a member of that gang with Pretty Banomyong and Plague Pibunsongkram.
Sure, the People's Party, sure.
Yeah, it's got an interesting pedigree, that Soi. So it was named after this guy whose name was Thonglor. So yeah, and a quick summary here, Kanaratsadon eventually broke into two. The military half, led by Plague Pibunsongkram, who we covered in episode 27, and the civilian half, led by Pretty Banomyong. So yeah, really interesting history there.
Cool. So basically, if you probably the best place to begin is just talk about the area around Thonglor BTS station. So if you get off at the BTS, you're at the mouth of the Soi, and if you can walk in either direction, kind of east or west. Recently, a new kind of Mediterranean place has opened up called Hummus Boutique, which is right next to Thonglor BTS station. And some of you, if you're locals, you might know a Mediterranean place off of Saturn called Mama Dolores. Well, Hummus Boutique is kind of a semi-branch of Mama Dolores, and unsurprisingly, they've got killer hummus and falafel and Mediterranean food, and it's also and they've got good pizzas. Mama Dolores is known for its like huge stone-fired oven, and it's also one of the few places in the city where you can get a vegan pizza with like actually non-dairy cheese on it. I know most of you probably don't care about that, but I do. Right there, I'd recommend Hummus Boutique, and then as you walk towards Thong Lor and past Thong Lor, there's a lot of really good street food right there, which Greg knows more about than I do.
Yeah. There's like a lot of cool sort of shop houses that spill out onto the sidewalk, and there's a couple of places that are right on the sidewalk. One really good place right on the corner of Soi 57, which is like got some cool seafood with bubbling tanks of water with live prawns and crabs and stuff in there, and that smelled real good when we walked by. And then, of course, all down 57, there's a bunch of street food, too, a lot of Japanese restaurants, some good drinking spots. So that stuff wasn't there when I lived there, that's for sure. So it's kind of gone hipster on that side of thing. We walked just a little bit further that we stopped for a quick drink at the beginning of the night at Octave Rooftop Lounge and Bar, which is at the top of the Marriott Hotel on Soi 57, which I really like. I think it's one of the nicest views of any rooftop bar in Bangkok, despite not being that high.
That's right. When we think of rooftop bars, we tend to think of the Banyan Tree or State Tower, but the Marriott on Soi 57 has a killer rooftop bar. It's actually 3 floors. All 3 floors have great views, and in a way, as Greg pointed out when we were there, that because it's on the 45th floor and not significantly higher, it's a little bit lower. It actually kind of improves the view and makes you feel like you're kind of closer to the city.
Yeah, it's strangely because it's a little bit more intimate, and it's a great view of the surrounding area, and there's not a lot of tall buildings, so it gives you a great view, but it's also, there are some really tall buildings being built, so it does give you a really good idea of how quickly the area is developing. But yeah, I highly recommend Octave. I think it's really nice. Not cheap, but really nice.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so we finished after that, and then we walked back to Thong Lor, and we started walking down it. Now, Thong Lor is kind of a weird street because you go down about 300 meters, and then it kind of bends half sharply, like 45 degrees to the right. And
that's right.
That first little section is full of there's a really famous fruit vendor there. There's a couple of flower shops, some Korean barbecue joints, a lot of Japanese food joints. But it's not sort of it's almost like a separate part of Thong Lor. It's got its own little vibe going on there.
Yeah, that first stretch is a little bit more old school. Like I think there's some of the closer to Sukhumvit is some of the original shop houses.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit it has a little bit more old school vibe. Like you pointed out, an old barber shop you used to go to. So the near the mouth of the Soi tends to be the older area.
I need to qualify that because I am bald. But, 15 years ago, I did have a bit more hair than I do now, and I didn't shave my head fully like I do now. So I used to go to this old school barbershop there, and these 3 85-year-old dudes used to use these old school shaving techniques. So that's why. But yeah, that's how I qualify my barbershop experience as a bald man.
That's great. And let me say this as kind of a general overview when we talk about the rest of Thong Lor. Our friend Paul, who I pointed out is kind of a Thong Lor expert. He's lived there for a very long time. It is probably the most concentrated area of Japanese restaurants in the entire city. According to our buddy, and this is hard to believe, but he insists that he's counted this multiple times. There are more than 100 different Japanese restaurants in the entire Thong Lor area. So if you want Japanese food, obviously there's other places you can get Japanese food, but Thong Lor is probably the most concentrated area of Japanese food in the city.
What do you think one day they'll start calling this place Little Japan?
I don't know, but we just in researching for this episode, we took a walk with our buddy Paul down the Soi, and there's a ton of Japanese places. They're just everywhere. So if that's your thing, if you're into Japanese food, then Thong Lor is your place.
I really think so. Like, I think that just the way some neighborhoods develop, like for whatever reason, a lot of the large apartment buildings sort of on the east and west side of Thong Lor, that's where a lot of the Japanese expats end up living, and the restaurants cater to that. But it seems to have just kind of taken off. So I would say, like, one big difference I've noticed is that Thong Lor, I'm going to start calling it Little Tokyo or Little Japan, because it is overwhelmingly a Japanese experience, definitely food wise, although there is other food to get there. But if you want real good sushi, real good Japanese food at restaurants that are visited by Japanese people, then Thong Lor is your place to go.
No doubt. Now, as a second generalization, I would say that Thong Lor is a great place to go for high-end cocktails. Now, it's totally not my scene at all. I don't really get it. It's too expensive for my tastes. But there are multiple very high-end cocktail places. We just checked out a couple of them, but there's a nice little gin bar called Just a Drink, maybe. And I know, Greg, you've hit a couple of the other ones before.
Yeah, there's another one that is quite well known, but it's one of those places that you have to know where it is before you go, otherwise you'll never find it, and it's called Jay Borofsky. So my buddy Joseph, who's a mixologist, a very well-known one, opened this place, and it's a beautiful, small little place. And you know what the interesting thing about this place? They have no menu. You go and you say, can I have a menu? They're like, we don't have a menu. What do you want? And you describe what kind of drink you like, and they make you a custom drink. So it's really, really neat. But, damn, it ain't cheap.
The key thing about this place is that there's no signage.
There's no sign. There's no big sign. There's no lights. It's just a door in the side of a brick wall with a tiny little plaque that says Jay Borofsky.
Can you tell our listeners where it is?
Yeah. Of course, you can Google it, so it's all over the place. But it's on Soi 7, just like a little dead end Soi down there on the right hand side. But very cool place. But I mean, it is indicative of Thong Lor. We should say, if you go out to Thong Lor to eat or drink, like, you're going to be paying a lot. It's not a cheap Soi. And I would say it's probably one of the more expensive places to certainly to live, definitely to go out and have fun in the city.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, by Bangkok standards, it's expensive. That actually leads me to my third generalization about Thong Lor. There's a bunch of expensive condos. So, I mean, if you want an upscale living situation, Thong Lor is got some pretty high rents, but nice places. I have some buddies in some of those condos. They're quite nice, and they're building more. But that's kind of an upscale place to live.
Yeah, and you know what I think is really cool about Thong Lor is because there's a Bangkok bylaw that says you cannot build a building more than 8 stories tall on a soi that's not wider than 10 meters. And I think it's really cool because a lot of the sois that come back off of Thong Lor and go like sort of back towards the tree green areas there, they're quite small, and a lot of them have older, really nice, lived in, beautiful old apartments, and I don't think many of those can be knocked down to build giant new ones. So the point is that they're like on Thong Lor Soi 8 and Thong Lor Soi 17, places like that, like they go kind of deep back into the sois, and it's really, really nice. There's some really cool shop houses and some really cool condos and apartments that you can find back there.
So you're saying there might actually be some rental deals off of Thong Lor, but not very far.
Yeah, I think so, and I haven't looked myself, but I think it's kind of got a cool mix. Like the main drag is real expensive, and these cool new hip towers that are going up all and down the soi are certainly not cheap. But if you're willing to live off the soi a little bit, you can find some really nice, quiet places back there. So it's kind of got a good mix of old and new.
Another thing about Thong Lor is, although there's tons of Japanese food, of course there are a bunch of Thai restaurants, and actually some of them are not a bad deal. I'm a big fan of a Thai restaurant called Palm, as in like Palm, and I think Palm is one of the best deals for Thai food that's not street food. So I don't know what you call it. I guess technically it might be royal Thai food, so it's upscale Thai food, but it's actually not that expensive. So it's the kind of place where you could have really good Thai food, multiple dishes, and spend, 300-400 baht.
Oh yeah? Okay.
Yeah, which I think is a good deal. Like, so you're not going to be dropping 1,000 baht in there. And so for me, I'm used to street food for 60 baht, 80 baht, 100 baht. If you get a few dishes, 150 baht. So to get a nice kind of upscale meal for 300 to 400 baht, I think it's a good deal. So I recommend Palm.
And there's another really good restaurant down there. The name always makes me laugh, and I'm a little bit nervous saying it, but it's called Supanica.
Supanica.
And that's Supanniga. I mispronounce that however you want.
Now, why does that make you nervous, Greg?
Don't try to lead me down to a dark place here, Ed. But it's Supanica, and it's very good. I've been there a few times. There's a couple of locations throughout the city, but this one on Thong Lor, I think, is the original one. Very good place too. Good street food, but done in a restaurant, and it won't break the bank. So that's a nice option as well.
All right. So my fourth theme is malls, or I should say mini malls.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of mini malls throughout Thong Lor, and they're actually pretty cool. I kind of like them.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a place called J Avenue that has like a Starbucks and a Burger King and a Tops. There's a very well-known place called the 8 building on Thonglor 8 that has 24-hour Foodland. There's a very well-known place called the Commons that has all kinds of bars and restaurants. And I think, Greg, where's Commons? I think it's Soi 17.
Yeah, Soi 17. That's the one I mentioned that goes, actually, if you go past the Commons and then it kind of curves around to the left, there's some nice buildings back there. I really like the Commons. I think it's a beautiful place. Yeah. Again, bit expensive, but really nice design, cool music, really funky, cool people inside, which I think is indicative of most of the places on Thong Lor itself. I will say, one thing I did notice on our research trip, tattoos.
Really?
I saw a lot of people with not just a little butterfly on the shoulder, but like full sleeves, tattoos on their legs and stuff. So it's definitely a hip place with...
So you mean kind of like chic, upscale tattoos. You don't mean like down and dirty, like bar girl tattoos. That's not what you're talking about.
No. I mean like a lot of like ripped dudes with like neck tattoos, or women with cool tattoos on their legs or something like that. Like it just seems that a lot of the people who hang out on Thong Lor are sort of like the millennial generation, young, hip, out for a good time. So, that doesn't describe you or I, sadly, anymore.
Gotcha.
But that's a vibe I got, yeah.
And I don't, I've kind of lost count of my themes. my themes. I think I might be on the fifth theme. My fifth theme is just unique bars that really have their own personality. If there's one thing, I guess there's many things, but one thing I actually don't like about Thai shops and restaurants and bars is I feel like a lot of shops and bars are the same no matter where you go. Like there's 1,000,001 like beer bars, and they're basically copies of exactly the same place.
Yeah.
And then
lame.
Yeah, same thing with a lot of street restaurants. They're exactly the same with the little plastic stools, and it's just there's 1,000 of them, and they're exactly the same.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate when I go to a bar and I'm like, wow, I've never been to a place like this before. And Thong Lor has a bunch of places like that. So I'm gonna name a few that I recommend, and some of these come from our friend Paul who lives there. But there's a cocktail place called Playhouse. There's a very kind of funky old school place called Shades of Retro.
I love that place. That's been there for years, and it's great.
Yeah, super interesting place called Bad Motel. Probably one of the best bars on Thong Lor. Another cocktail place called Rabbit Hole.
That's a cool place too.
Yeah, and a really cool place called T-Rex, which has got its own vibe. It's kind of a music bar. It's unique. It's like you go to these places and you're looking around. You're like, wow, finally, like an owner with their own personality, an owner with their own ideas. Right. So,
and I think Thong Lor is home to the granddaddy of these kind of bars, and that's Iron Fairies. That's Ash Sutton's place. I think that was one of the first places to break out and really sort of say, hey, this is completely different from any other bar you've been to. And Iron Fairies is still there. And Ash also opened a place on Soi 13 called Seenspace with a couple of cool beer bars and a dessert place and a coffee place. And so another little mini mall there that's got its own unique little attitude and vibe.
For sure.
So yeah, there's a ton of places there. You're right, and it's like each place before they set up, they're like, what are we going to do that's different? Which I think is a pretty cool way to approach a business.
I like that. Like I kind of feel that's what I'm used to at home. It's like at home, I feel like every bar is trying to figure out how to differentiate themselves. But I think that's much less common out here, where people just get an idea. I'm going to open a beer bar.
Right.
And it's exactly like every other beer bar. So Thong Lor definitely has the uniqueness thing going for it, for sure.
Yeah.
So what else do we got to talk about here? I mean, I'm probably, this might be a little bit out of order, but I'm afraid I'm going to forget. When you get to the end of Thong Lor, close to Petbury, there's a couple really unusual places or really cool places. One of them is a blues bar called Nothing But the Blues, which I think I did mention when we did our episode on the blues.
Live music episode.
Yeah, but Nothing But the Blues is just a great place to hear blues on the weekends. So I think they open Thursday, Friday, Saturday, but they got great live music, especially on Friday nights. You can hear the Chai Blues Band. Chai is a old kind of blues god in Thailand, and his band is fantastic, Chai and the Blues Maniacs, so I recommend them on Friday night for sure. And Nothing But the Blues is in the same building as Game Over, which is one of those kind of board game, I guess you'd call it a lounge. So I've only been to these places a couple times, but they're pretty popular, and there's a bunch of them around the city. And basically you go there, you hang out, and then they have like tons of different board games you can play.
Yeah, I've been there once too, and it was really neat. And you think, like, who's going to pay and go and sit around a table and play board games? Turns out a lot of people. That's really quite popular right now. And one thing I noticed too is, like, when I lived there was a ton of wedding studios, like full service, rent the clothes, do the photography, plan the wedding, like full on wedding studios.
Right.
Those are mostly gone now. And I think I only noticed like one or two wedding studios on our walk the other night.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, but I think I had wedding photos taken somewhere on Thonglor. I do remember that.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, cool.
You know, to be honest, we should mention some negatives about Thonglor. I think, to me, the first negative is it is kind of an expensive place. I mean, I think that's kind of just a fact of Thonglor. It's not cheap by Bangkok standards. I wouldn't say it's crazy, but so that's one negative. The second negative is that, considering how upscale many of the establishments are, I feel like the street still looks like any old Bangkok street. Like, it's reasonably dirty. There, it's like an ankle breaker. It's like there's like holes in the there's holes in the pavement. There's garbage on the side of the street. When you and I were walking down there were like rats ran in front of us.
Yeah, we saw a huge rat jump out. Dude, it was the size of a cat.
Yeah, that's right. And there's still some kind of like almost like abandoned lots, which is very typical, weirdly, of Bangkok. So it's a little bit odd. So the very nice places, but the street itself is, it's got crazy wires like twisting around like everywhere else. So I would not say it's not really an upscale neighborhood. It just has upscale places.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And, it reminds me a lot of Yaowarat in Chinatown. And during the daytime, it's just kind of your regular grungy, junky street. There's nothing special about it. But it's when the sun goes down and the lights come on, that's when it really starts to get some attitude. So, yeah, during the daytime, it's nothing really much to look at. But during the night, it's fun. But still, you're gonna trip into a pothole if you're not careful.
One thing to mention, to be a little more specific, of course, we mentioned it's expensive. The odd thing is there's not good happy hours on the street. You would think that they would have good happy hours, suck people in for happy hours, then crank up the drink prices later. But there's really not a lot of cheap happy hours. Our buddy Paul, who knows it really well, basically said there's no good happy hours. So no matter how early you go, expect to pay a lot for your drink.
Sort of like the grin and bear it hour, One of the things that I noticed too was that when I lived there, there was a lot of street food, and there is almost no street food on Thong Lor. There, you can easily find it, but compared to what it used to be, the variety is way less than it used to be.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
it's just, I think it's just become such an expensive place to set up and do business that slinging bowls of banh mi noodles is just ain't gonna cut it anymore.
Instead of great street food, there is a McDonald's and there is Burger King.
Well, yes. So. Is that like Western street food?
That's right. That's our version of street food.
Yeah. We also should mention, too, the cool red bus that still, for some reason, manages to stay in business running up and down the Soi. So if you go all the way down the end of the Soi, underneath the U-turn bridge before Sansep Canal, there's a little red bus that parks down there, maybe a few of them. And they do these sort of like milk runs up the Soi. And this is like, if I stood on the bus, it would go like, and tilt to the right. Like it's not big, and it's like this little minibus, and all it does is go up and down the Soi, and for like whatever it is, 5 or 7 baht or something, you can just kind of jump on and get taken up to the end of the Soi if you don't want to get on a motorcycle taxi or a tuk-tuk or a taxi, which I think is kind of cool because that was there when I got there, and it was old then. So it's kind of an interesting little antique throwback that still sort of operates in that area.
Right, but it's a very cheap way to go up and down the Soi if you're not into motorbikes.
Yeah. It doesn't go up like all the time, but every 10 or 20 minutes or something like that.
Another thing that we have to mention, as you guys can kind of tell, listeners, Thonglor is just packed with stuff. So Greg and I are having trouble like fitting everything in here. But another thing to mention is Thonglor Soi 10, which runs between Thonglor and Akamai. And Thonglor Soi 10 is filled with bars and restaurants. There's several kind of very hot, chic Thai clubs, if you're into like Thai clubs. There's some mini malls in there, a bunch of restaurants. There's a great workspace at the corner of Thonglor Soi 10. So that area between Thonglor and Akamai on Soi 10, right there, if you want to go out late night, it's packed.
A little bit of trivia, that little co-working space on Soi 10, Thonglor Soi 10, that's where Tony and I recorded most of season 1 of the podcast.
Wow, so that was what, 2010, 2011?
2010, yeah. 2010 to 2012.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's also that really cool place, that really cool restaurant on Thonglor Soi 10 called Sway, which has probably the best chicken wings in Bangkok. And it's owned by a Canadian, and he does the Caesar, which we've talked about on the show before, which is basically a Bloody Mary, but instead of tomato juice, they use this thing called clamato juice, which is clam and tomato juice mixed together. It's a very Canadian thing. Sounds disgusting. Ain't that bad. I got to get you out there, Ed, and we're going to try a Caesar on video for our patrons. How's that? We'll videotape it.
It's about the most unappealing drink I've ever heard of.
Nah, it's an acquired taste. You'll get used to it. We should also talk about transportation, getting in and out of Thonglor.
Well, of course, you got the BTS going right there to the end of the Soi, so that's the easiest way to get there.
Yeah. And down to the other end is Petbury Road. I got to say, Petbury is like if I had to choose my least favorite road in Bangkok, it would be Petbury, because it's just a crappy, dirty, dusty road full of abandoned businesses. But it does have the Sansep Canal, which runs all the way right through the center of Bangkok, and it goes all the way down to Wat Saket down in Ratanakosin. So if you want to sort of get in and out of Thonglor, on one end there's the SkyTrain, or if you want to get in and out during the daytime anyway, on the other end there's always the Sansep Canal boat, which is very convenient. But beyond that, you're stuck to taxis.
I think on a previous show, Greg and I mentioned that if you take a Thai bus, you like qualify as a local. You know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But I'll say this:
it's like a merit badge.
If you take a taxi boat on Sansep Canal, you're more than a local. Like, I don't even know what you are. You're like a Jedi. You're like a Bangkok Jedi. Like, because the Sansep Canal, that's just something that it took me. I think I was here for 5 years before I realized you could really take a taxi boat on the canal. Like, I think I did a tour. I did like a tour along the canal, but then like eventually I realized, wait a minute, I can get a taxi on the, on the Klong, and it'll go all the way down to like, next to Democracy Monument. That's like a Bangkok Jedi.
You want to hear the sad story? This is how lame my first few... I think I've talked about how my first few months in Bangkok were not very pleasant. I was really unhappy here. And I thought, like, one day, I'm like, all right, this is it. I'm going to get on the canal. I'm going to learn how to do this. So I went down and I waited by the stop on Thonglor under the bridge there. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I'm like, maybe this is just normal. And there's no one around. And it was sort of like 7 o'clock at night, so it was dark. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I was there for like a ridiculous amount of time, like 40 minutes. And I'm like, maybe this isn't the right idea. Like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Until finally someone came up to me and they pointed out. And so there was like basically an out of order today sign, like this pier closed today. But it was only in Thai, right? I'd been here like 3 weeks. I was just like, oh, defeated again. Bangkok has won. Let me slink back to my shitty little apartment to hide from the city.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, it was funny. But anyway, I think that about wraps it up for Thong Lor. My overall impressions were that since I lived there, I mean, it's been completely transformed in the past 10 years. And judging by the amount of construction and activity going on, I think you'll see the same amount of change in the next 5 years. Like, it's just constantly being upgraded and evolving.
I mean, it's so. I mean, the last thing I'll say about Thonglor is this: it's just dense. It's dense with clubs, shops, restaurants, bars, like side soys, some street food. If you spend a couple hours there, you will find something to intrigue you for sure.
Yeah, and I think that it's probably a little bit too hip for its own good, but I got to say, if I can afford to, I think if I could live anywhere in the city, it would probably be either Thong Lor or Ari. I love my neighborhood I'm in now, but I really like Thong Lor. I think it's a really cool, interesting, hip place, and if you can live there, great. If you can stay there while you're here visiting, even better, I think. But
Agreed.
It's a fun area to explore.
Definitely worth checking out, no doubt about it.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or leave. That's where one of us surprises the other with a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or hate so much that it makes us want to leave forever. This week it's my turn. Ed, I'm going old school on this one.
Uh-oh.
This is about as basic as you can get in terms of things about Bangkok that some people find useful or some people hate. Whistles. Security guards with whistles.
Well, of course, that's got to be a loathe. I mean, I let me say this. I hope I'm not like pulling the curtain back on our operations, but we're not supposed to repeat love, loathe, or leaves. Are you trying to tell me there has not been a prior love, loathe, or leave about whistles?
It's funny. I think there may have been way back in the day, but I can't remember what it was.
They're so annoying that it actually might be worthy of a repeat. They're so damn annoying.
Well, that's the thing, because it's easy to say like, oh, I hate those, but they're so persistent. They're not going away, and they seem to be everywhere. They're ubiquitous. So at some point, someone must have found use out of them.
Yeah, okay. Listeners, in case you don't know what we're talking about the fact that various cops, security guards, I don't even know who they are, but Thai officials like to blow whistles really loud. This ties into one of my mysteries of Thailand. You know, I've been here a long time. There's a lot of stuff I don't understand. One of the things I don't understand is why Thai people play music so unbelievably loud. So that also has been a previous love, loathe, or leave. But I think the whistle fits in with this thing. So to me, the mystery is the Thai people are so nice and non-confrontational in general. Like, you know, Thai people are not in your face. Like, in general, they're not in your face. But oddly, they like to play music loud, and officials like to blow their whistles really loud.
No, I can get it if it's like on the SkyTrain platform and someone does something dangerous and they blow a whistle. Like, I get that. Or down on the street, like, you know, directing traffic or something. But I sort of want to narrow it down a little bit. What about the guards who use it to direct traffic, like parking lots and things like that?
Absolutely.
Are they necessary?
Absolutely. It's funny. This reminds me of a story. I met a buddy of mine up in Chiang Mai who was visiting. So he's not a Thailand regular, and I met him up in Chiang Mai, and I took him to his hotel, and we decided to rent a car because we were going to drive around Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai. So we actually had a car we rented at the airport, and we went to the hotel. And when we got to the hotel, which was just kind of a very average place, we were only going to be there one night, there was a parking lot attendant who had like a whistle, and he was so serious about directing us into a parking spot and like waving his hands and blowing his whistle and making sure, like, you know, it was like all we
directing a 747 into the terminal.
Seriously, like all we were doing is parking, and he's like backing us up and like blowing the whistle, like stop, and like he was just like, and he had a uniform on, and he was just like overly officious, like overly self-important. You know,
I almost admire that. Like, the guy dude takes pride in his job. Good on him. But, you know, I've driven a lot in Bangkok, and I have never benefited from the use of a whistle. Hand signals, maybe, but, you know, unless there's like some truck bearing down on me that I need to be warned about in a parking lot. I think I loathe the whistle. I don't think that it's useful. I don't think anyone finds it helpful. I think it's just a kind of annoying thing that needs to be shanghaied.
It's one of the enduring mysteries of Thailand. I'm telling you, and for our listeners, just to be clear, we're not talking about just the average use of a whistle. We're talking about like blowing a whistle like as loud as you can,
while you're backing into a parking spot at 2 kilometers per hour.
It's like inappropriately loud. For no apparent reason. So this is
like I said, it might seem obvious to be a loathe, but at some point someone must have said, what would help here? Maybe a whistle. So I'm sure that someone out there finds them helpful, but I just don't know who they are.
Good question. Maybe if we have any Thai listeners out there, so any Thai listeners, if you can give any kind of explanation for the unusually loud blowing of whistles, we would love to hear it. We'd love to hear it. Okay, so before we wrap up, I'd like to give a special thanks to all of our lovely patrons. As you know, we don't run ads, we don't have sponsors, so we really do appreciate the support we get from our patrons. If you want to learn more, just head over to bangkokpodcast.com/support. And if you want to get in touch with us, it's easy. Bangkok Podcast on social media, any social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We are very polite, and if you write, we will answer.
Yeah. You can also find us online, where we post each episode and carry on conversations with our listeners. Actually, just this morning, I sent out a quick video that I took last night when you and I were out exploring Thong Lor, of my attempt to use a ridiculously small bathroom. So I sent that out to all of our line friends, which I got some good feedback on, but it's a funny video. I think we're going to start sending more stuff out online. I think
good idea.
350 people, and I think it's a cool way to sort of get some information and some funny stuff out there. But if you like that, you can find the line QR code on the website. You can scan it and join us. You can also reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you back here next week.
Absolutely. See you next week.
That's a really good way to put it. And it reminds me a lot of Yawarat and China. Oh, good Lord. Tasted the whiskey on that one.